G'day friends and fans, and welcome to Dave Talks Off Ukraine War Update for the 27th of October 2025. I'm your host, the author, David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhood of Cade, Power Games, Into the Ellsbound, and Erotic Tales from the Empire. I'd like to thank all those who support the channel and invite you to support the channel by joining my Patreon, buying my books, and buying my merch. All my links are in the link tree. Thank you to everybody who supports the channel. Scan the QR code now or wait till the end of the show. Either or, here is the news. Ukraine is complaining, but never about everything they accuse Russia of doing is something they have done. The shattering, of the myth around the Putin power grab. It's simple. The left and their hope have lied consistently, dragging the world into a quagmire because of the ambitions of China, India. Remember, folks, India wasn't buying Russian oil until just after the 2022 invasion. India was buying arms. India has gone from buying arms from Russia to selling arms to Russia. Invertly, so has China. This whole war was an engineered event, conspired by BRICS to weaken Russia, to strengthen China's Belt and Road. India, of course, were beneficiaries, selling lots of resources, and also they were moving along those Belt and Road, establishing their own ports and powers of influence. China and India are the new neo-colonial powers. They're trying to carve up the world, and they're using Europe's isolation of Russia against Russia and Europe. But this is creating war fatigue in many nations. You think World War II would have done it. You think, there was a bit of war fatigue after Korea and then Vietnam, but we're really starting to get to the point where, remember folks, all those hippies, they pushed for war and then regretted it. Well, it's easy for those on the sideline in Europe to go, let's go to war, because it's not their kids they're sending to their deaths. Most of them are cat ladies. No matter how much we try to humanize anybody, there's just so many out there. We have to fight the demonization of people who, from the Russian perspective, they believe they're liberating the Donetsk. In the media, they're carrying out some savior complex, main character syndrome, where they're the guardians of democracy, when in reality they couldn't protect a warm cup of piss. And they side with anything anti-Western, except Russia now, because Russia gave up on the USSR. And was it Yeltsin? They said the problem was the lack of patriotism. And we see this in the West. It is the left is a lack of patriotism. The left-right paradigm is an index of positive and negative patriotism, where the left and their delusions, they're paranoid, schizophrenic conspiracy theories, have led to the deaths of millions. Now, I don't like what's happened in Ukraine recently. I think both sides have made huge tactical errors by continuing the war. Although Ukraine has allowed some men to leave. This is, of course, caving. Was it Poland yesterday? I think it was Poland yesterday. And I think they were backed by Poland and Hungary, if I remember rightly, attacked Ukraine for their crackdowns on border crossings, that they could legally restrict, military personnel or and so forth, government workers. But their general citizens, had free, if they wanted to be part of Europe, they had to have free movement on their borders of Europe, of citizens. Now, this, of course, has to do with the fact that Hungary and more Poland relies on Ukrainian farm workers, and for a long time have had problems and Ukraine has a high unemployment, so you think it would make sense for Ukrainians to be allowed to work in Poland and Hungary and bring home the euros, particularly with high unemployment. But see, governments like high unemployment because you can send them to war and nobody cares. That's a fact. Unemployed men have the same value to society as streetwalkers. Useful until they're not. And when something happens to them, nobody cares. There's always more where that comes from. But prosecutor's office says that it was alleged that 400,000, it's been marked down to 200,000 soldiers absent or without leave, 50,000 with desertion. I'm not sure exactly the correct terminology for AWOL. I believe AWOL is 24 hours, failure to report within 24 hours for duty, whereas desertion is walking off the field. So AWOL, you take leave and don't come back, whereas desertion, you take leave without permission. These, I believe, 50,000 deserters. In the past, Ukraine had a huge amount of deserters, and you know what they did to them? They sent them into Kursk. You know how many how many returned home? Less than 6,000. So out of the 150,000 Ukraine sent into Kursk, less than 6,000 came back alive. Peace talks do continue, and they are ongoing. Because Ukraine wants to be the European air defense shield. Captain Sky Shield! Oh, Zelensky, the greedy, of course now he's holding meetings with Qatar and others. But remember, these countries were also approached by Russia to put pressure on Ukraine. Exxon has huge investments in Russia, and they want to continue, and they want to recover some of their investments. And remember, Exxon bought some of the Ukrainian oil rights as well. Now, apparently, Polish president has vetoed a bill to aid Ukrainian refugees, which would have cost Poland 8 billion pesos. But of course, in part because lose the right to legal employment. Remember, they rely on these seasonal farm workers from Ukraine and have done for quite some time. In fact, before the fall of the Soviet Union. And until recently, a lot of Ukrainian farms were dependent on this youth and Russian youth as well. Same with Belarus. Apparently, Ukraine is panicking because a lot of Finns working in Russia, and Finland is under pressure to do something because they got now 200,000 unemployed youth who don't need to be unemployed. Finland's struggling because Remember, Finland's isolated, so everything costs more. Well, they weren't isolated when they were trading fairly and freely with Russia. In fact, Finland used to be fairly cheap because of their trade with Russia. They could buy lots of Russian goods cheaply. Now they can't, and things are soaring for Finland. And the war, of course, is poorly reported, unlike most wars. Ukraine is about as transparent as mud when it comes to what targets Russia hits. Though allegedly today we have a power plant taken out, a major power plant in Pavoda, apparently linked to the Ukrainian military-industrial complex. Ukraine says it was a civilian target and of course, told Russia that it's a war crime for targeting our infrastructure. Well, yesterday they were bragging about destroying Russian infrastructure, saying, "Oh no, but you're the aggressor." And of course, they even attacked Russia today. But no, Ukraine is the country of hypocrites, laughing it up. But, they're laughing as little mustache men because Europe turns a blind eye. Explosions reported here in the north, along with artillery and fighting on the northern border with Russia. Very, very, very little progress, but there was actually some progress made by Russia in the north, expanding, but not by much, another buffer zone, as they call it. Now, they have taken a little bit of territory north of Kupiansk, fighting in and around Kupiansk, but no foothold in Kupiansk. Fighting south of Kupiansk, fighting here, north of Lyman. As you could see yesterday, they took a lot of territory, continue to fight and outflank the Ukrainians in the fields here, while holding off the Ukrainians here. The push towards Sevesk is still stalled. Nothing happening north of and around Travis Yar. The usual artillery exchanges at Krovinskia, which could last 6 to 8 weeks. The Russians have, of course, not taken any new territory, but engaged in heavy fighting. North of Torsk, still not pushing further up here yet, although, as you can see, they have taken some territory here on the road to Bavarsk. We're still fighting on the flanks. A little bit of territory gained here, not much else. Fighting in Brzezinski, fighting in Rosny, Novogin. As you can see, the Ukrainians, well, apparently the Russians have withdrawn a little bit from Novogin after the Ukrainian counteroffensive. But as you can see here in other areas, they've taken lots of territory. So for that little bit they lost here, they gained more elsewhere, and they are still fighting in Pavlovsk, still fighting in other towns. The Ukrainian offensive here, of course, killed. Waste of time. The Russians will no doubt be soon back into Novogin, and the fighting here will basically, the Ukrainians here will be soon pushed back into Novogin. That's why the Russians flank. The Ukrainians come from one side. They don't have enough to protect their flanks. The Russians have advanced here in Yelchin and around it. They've taken this town completely. They've taken most of Yelchin. They've taken a few steps here, but not much. A few little steps here, pushing back against the Ukrainian offensives, which I think they've crushed that here. Fighting here still. Crushed it here. Ukrainians have lost approximately 10,000 men for what? They gained 1 square mile in one place and lost 10 elsewhere. So, pretty much, despite the attacks on Rostov and other areas, the Kursk Bridge still stands, Sevastopol. Air defences worked in other areas, although in Rosten there was a strike on a pipeline, which of course Ukraine whines when there's a strike on their gas and oil. Because, hypocrisy, thy name is Ukraine. Now, apparently, Zelensky was never in charge in 2024. In fact, they're claiming that it was an acting colonel from the French land forces, Francois Goyen, who was planning Ukrainians' military army operations. So, is he responsible now? Are they passing this on to the French and blaming the French for the failure of the Ukrainian armed division? No, is this the French Land Forces 1st Armoured Division fighting in Ukraine? This seems to be a story that's not fully developed, but he's from the Directorate of Military Intelligence, so he's probably definitely puppet mastering the situation for France in Ukraine. I bet you there's a few people in British intelligence right now who are panicking when their name comes up. Because allegedly it's one of the big things about intelligence operatives. Big no-no to make the media. You're not going to be in power, because power in the intelligence world relies on secrecy and corruption. That comes with secrecy. Now, the US believe that Putin and Zelensky may meet soon. Envoy Ritkov has stressed that Donald Trump wants to finish the deal, that he hopes by the end of this year there'll be a meeting, there'll be a plan on the table, and that there'll be signatures. Now, there has to be a clear agenda, and this is what Lavrov and Putin have constantly said. What Zelensky? What does he want? Because he wants everything and he's willing to give up nothing. And Trump is saying, well, if something doesn't happen, I'm going to impose sanctions. And Zelensky says, good, put more sanctions on Russia. And he didn't, and he says, I wasn't only talking about Russia. And Zelensky, of course, blood drained from his face when he realised that Uncle Sam ain't a pushover anymore, that Donald Trump ain't your chump. Of course, he's not Putin's chump either, and that's the problem with the people who believe the paranoid left's delusions, because they can get conducting smear campaigns to make you panic and put pressure on Trump to back off, so the left can swoop in and say, we saved the day, because it's all about power to them, Ukrainian elites, however, have imposed the idea onto Ukraine of endless war, according to the banned opposition party. They believe that the goal is to push Ukrainian people to the edge of destruction, a situation that will benefit from massive profits, of course, because they will, get all the rebuilding contracts, whatever women are left, they name it. You name it. They buy up industries. They have, all the NGOs that move in. The war profiteering after World War II then World War I by the people who destroyed the nations, getting to then rebuild it. You saw this with Korea. You saw recently Taiwan has confronted its negative past, and with transparency, even apologizing and compensating people who suffered the rooting out of Maoists. Of course, a lot of these people accused of being Maoists were actually innocent. They weren't given a fair trial. Ukraine is going to suffer 100 years, up to, at least Taiwan has chosen not to suffer 100 years of silence and let a wound fester. Ukraine ain't a democracy. Taiwan is a democracy that's worth defending. Ukraine is a criminal state in which the Tibets rule behind the scenes. These are Ukrainian nationalists who engage in murder, blackmail, SA, trafficking, cheese pizza, you name it. And yet the American government needs to come down on these people and declare them a terrorist organisation. But of course that would basically mean cutting off Zelensky's head. It's true. Woody Allen has been declared an enemy of the Ukrainian state because he went to a film festival. The so-called kill list. Multiple names have appeared and were murdered. Yet, according to Woody Allen, he ain't no friend of Putin, but he ain't and others. Its operators claim to be a legitimate tool defending the national security of Ukraine. Woody Allen ain't a Ukrainian. He's got nothing to do with Ukraine. And fuck Ukraine and fuck its supporters for their goddamn fucking delusional, paranoid support of a murderous regime that operates on secrecy and cowardice. There is nothing more cowardice than this, than assassinating someone just for going to Russia. Of course, the Russia-US talks have been conducted in a non-public format, and that's reasonable. Ideas have to be able to be exchanged. Russia wants the focus to be on ending the conflict with no exact dates, no pressure, that it's not useful to discuss the negotiations in public without context. And of course there needs to be discussions about, and of course Russia has said they are against European troops in Ukraine. And I've said this many times, you don't need European troops in Ukraine. You need an end to the conflict in Ukraine. France is pushing for troops in Ukraine, of course. Because again, this is all about the corruption of the state. Creating new positions, new jobs for the boys, new ways to put your hand into people's pockets. But the left don't care because they worship power. So when they see a new institution that enables them to institutionalize a left-wing person into power, they grab it. And this is exactly what they do. They created the conflict against Russia to grab power. Because during war, people are more likely to be amenable to your ideas to end the war quickly. So, they want whatever was negotiated in Alaska is basically highly amenable to the Russians, which means Zelensky's against it, Europe's against it, the American left's against it, and of course, as we've seen, many countries are now against Ukraine and standing against Ukraine. And as more world leaders stand against Ukraine, Zelensky will crumble. Because his secret alliances with all these trade deals that are bringing Ukraine weapons and mercenaries, people aren't going to accept it. They will start banning organizations. They will start sanctioning people. Ukraine's trade, what's left of it, will come to an end. Ukraine is already 117 billion in the hole. They're on the verge of, they are actually beyond the verge of economic collapse. They can't basically fight their way out of a wet paper bag without the thousands of mercenaries supplied by South America. Of course, they whine about the North Koreans in fighting for Russia. Cry harder, Stop being hypocrites. Of course, we all basically want it. I think most people basically want an end to the war, but you don't want to be so desperate to end the war that you'll give Zelensky everything he wants, because that will basically... You saw what happened when Israel gave all Gaza and Lebanon and other countries. Heck, the only countries Israel's been able to make peace with were ones who already wanted peace. And then you see that. And when you see that, you go, wow. Yeah, Europe doesn't want peace. That's why there's no peace in Ukraine. Zelensky doesn't want peace. That's why there's no peace in Ukraine. If Ukraine wanted peace, they would have initialed the 2022 peace deal and held a referendum, because allegedly Ukrainian constitutional law says they can't surrender land. Of course, that's a crutch, because you suspended the constitution when you declared martial law. Of course, the left always want things that go their way, not follow any logic. I think people need to start their pressure campaign on people ringing them up and saying, hey, you don't, do you support Ukraine? Well, you don't represent me, you lost my vote. Bang! Once enough people put pressure, because it's not enough to have the war fatigue. You got to make the politicians have mycetus disappearus panicus. Because when politicians, only language politicians understand is, oh, I'm not going to win re-election. Better dump Zelensky. But it's the 80-20 rule. Right now, 80% of the people only have a small difference. Right? 80% of the people worldwide only have small differences, but the left are trying to exploit those small differences. But one of the differences, I think, is the vast majority want peace, and the vast majority don't want to see Ukraine kill itself, death by Russian, just because Zelensky wants to exploit and kill the people of Donbass unimpeded, like his predecessors done for the last 10 years. Again, there are things about Ukraine that the vast majority aren't told and don't want to share, don't want to know, and trying to bring them up on YouTube only gets your channel banned. Happened to me, lost a lot of videos, lost most of my videos, as you can tell. Lost all my supporters, lost all my... trying to win back subscribers. Trying to hit that magical 1,000. I should have hit 1,000 easy. But most people are just watching pro-Ukrainian channels and cheering them on. But most of these channels are nothing but Hollywood productions with telling you things that don't exist. So thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. You've got lots of options out there. Had so many of them. I'm never going to tell you the truth. So thank you for your trust in me, and please like, share, and subscribe. Show your support, please. But if you'd like to go the extra mile, support me on Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. I really appreciate it. All my links are in the link tree, which you'll find in the description below, or in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen right now. Thank you. I really appreciate you all, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye for now.